Now, this is a pretty remarkable feat. 2 days afterwards, he's got an analysis that shows how the buildings collapsed. Pretty remarkable. He didn't have the structural drawings. He didn't know anything about the temperatures. He knew nothing about the damage to the columns, but he had an analysis that showed exactly why the buildings came down. So he's a pretty interesting guy, by the way. He's not a structural engineer. His specialty is fracture analysis in ceramics. And he's a brilliant guy. He used to be the editor of the journal that he submitted the paper to. And he was the editor there for 8 years. He's been a professor at Northwestern University since the late 60s. He's 93 years old. He's still teaching and still working. And he's a brilliant guy. There's no question about it. He can write papers that will make your head swim. He came from the old Czechoslovakian country. His father was a famous engineer in Czechoslovakia, and he was in the United States, as it so happened, in 1967 when the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, and he was given asylum in the United States to stay in this country. So that's his background. Why he decided to weigh in on this is somewhat of a mystery. It's not his field, and yet he has stood by this report, and the editors have stood by it since then, which is going on 22 years now. So that's a little bit about the theory of why that justifies the NIST analysis. So they published this theory called Why Did the World Trade Center Collapse? Simple Analysis by Bažant and one of his graduate students in the Journal of Engineering Mechanics in January of 2002, a few months after the event. He said that a large dynamic load would have occurred caused by what he termed a powerful jolt, and that would overcome the reserve strength of the columns below. So that's his theory, right? The impact zone was weakened. The top of the building fell on the lower part of the building as a result of the weakening. It was so great of an impact that it caused the bottom of the building to collapse. And then when the top part of the building hit the ground, it also collapsed. So he called it a crush down, crush up theory. So people raised some various questions about this. So he defended it, and he said what did and did not cause the collapse of the World Trade Center, and that came out in October of 2008. So for several years, there was a lot of controversy about this theory of his. And he finally had to respond to it, and so he published a second paper in the same journal 7 years later. So this is a brief description, and I'll try to not bore you with this, but he used an energy analysis to construct his progressive collapse theory. So he said that the kinetic energy of the upper part of the building, that is the weight of the upper part of the building, was bigger than the resistance of the buckling in the collapse initiation zone, the inertial resistance of the structure in the building below the initiation zone, and the structural resistance of the columns in the building below the initiation zone. So in other words, the top of the building had enough power when it hit the lower part of the building to overcome the resistance and cause it to collapse. That was his theory.